Bateral tá comprada onde? É, a mãe dele é aquela cachorra. O cara mandar uma dessa, ele... Não, acabou. Comprado no 202, fudeu, comprado no 200. Tá porra, velho. Não, fez a vida aí, fi. Aham. É foda, né? Comprado no 210 foi foda. Caralho, velho. Porra. É isso daí, eu vou te contar uma coisa. A cara nem treme mais, filho. Demorou.
We got used to this idea that, the women were going to turn out and support these abortion referendums specifically. Mm-hmm. And we saw a weakness in that outcome in Florida, and yet a very strong Republican vote throughout the state, including traditional Democrat strongholds.
Is this not the motivating factor we thought it was?
It seems like, at least in this case, we have to wait and see. It has not been $100 million spent on this referendum. This closes the door on abortion access in most of of the South now, because this 6-week ban now in place in Florida and across the South for women who find themselves pregnant, they can't just go to a neighboring state anymore. And the first time since the Dobbs decision, we have seen abortion access go down. So this is big, big news.
Very important. Rick, we started on Georgia and North Carolina. If Donald Trump wins them both, do we go home?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, we're still getting a lot of vote in from the blue wall states. This has always been the most likely path for any Democrat. It was for Joe Biden, and it is now for Kamala Harris. We're watching Pennsylvania. It's going to take us all night to see that. We'll see how Michigan starts to develop, but right now it looks pretty solid. Both candidates are pursuing their paths. Donald Trump is in the position where he can do very well in the South, these Sunbelt states, and then will lose by one electoral vote if she runs the table on the blue wall.
Incredible. Is it blue wall or nothing for Kamala Harris?
That has always been the number one path for Kamala Harris. And obviously, if she doesn't get that, this thing becomes that much harder. And of course, that comes down to Pennsylvania. And the choice of the vice presidential nominee is something that if she doesn't pull this through, people are going to be second guessing. But we'll wait on that, Joe Matthew, because it's still very early.
I know. Well, we've got a lot to wait for. That's why they're our signature panel. John, back to you.
Hey, Joe, appreciate it. Thank you, sir. We'll be back with you in about 30 minutes' time. I want to keep going back to financial markets. Session highs on the S&P 500. I understand the session is incredibly young, but here we are. Here are the scores. Up by 2.6% on the small caps on the Russell. Up by 1% on the S&P 500. Switch on the board, turn the page and get to the bond market story. Yields higher by 16 basis points on a 30-year, 459.74. AMH, what are we looking at here? What are we trading on?
Everyone right now is thinking that Trump has this in the bag, which is what the financial markets is thinking. Everyone you talk to, especially individuals I'm texting with that are affiliates of the Harris campaign, they're saying it is too early to tell. It is not a perfect picture yet. But CBS News exit polling in Michigan says that younger voters are narrowly going for Trump right now. They're breaking, according to CBS's exit polling. NBC News exit polling in Wisconsin. Trump doubling his black support that he picked up in Wisconsin in 2020. If this remains, this shows that Trump has the advantage right now on some of these states that we are still waiting for, according to this exit polling. Take all that with a grain of salt, because today someone who's actually run presidential campaigns said to me, don't look at exit polling, don't quote exit polling. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. This is not a for sure conclusion, but what we're seeing right now is potentially what the financial markets are picking up on.
Libby alongside us nodding. Don't trust exit polls?
Don't trust exit polls. It's still early, and I think we'll see. What the market, though, is keying off on, as we talked about, is higher deficits and then also the potential for higher tariffs. Higher inflation coming from tariffs. And of course, President Trump, should he get elected, doesn't need Congress to impose tariffs. I think our expectation is, he will do something. He can do something day one, in particular on China. And so in some ways, maybe the market is getting a little bit over its skis just in terms of pricing a Trump victory, but in terms of what the potential impact of some of his policies are, probably makes sense that we could see a bit of, again, the steepening of the yield curve.
It's quite a move in the bond market. Yields higher at the long end on a 30-year by 16 basis points. Let's continue the conversation about the economy. Joining us now is Dana Peterson, the chief economist at the Conference Board. Dana, I want to come to you about confidence levels of consumers, of businesses as well. Going into this election, were they bouncing? Were they falling back? What was your read on things?
We were getting separate messages from CEOs of large companies versus consumers. So starting off with CEOs, they were a little bit concerned about the outlook for the economy as well as their own industries. In fact, our measure was just above 50. Anything above 50 is certainly optimism. So they were just barely optimistic. They're concerned about geopolitics. They're concerned about regulation. They're concerned about cybersecurity.
$72 mil e
Many companies are saying they're sitting on the sidelines with respect to investments. because they don't really know what to expect. But when it comes to the consumer, in October, consumers were really ebullient. Indeed, they kind of turned things around in terms of their concerns about the labor market. They figured the labor market was good. They're expecting the stock market to continue to rise. And indeed, when we asked them to fill in any answers or anything about what they think is going to impact the economy, they continue to say inflation and prices were a concern, but they are seeing improvement on both of those measures. And when it came to the election, they didn't really seem to be paying that much attention. So I guess this definitely will be a nail biter.
When it comes to that consumer confidence, you said they're feeling better. Why are they feeling better recently when we're hearing from corporations that people aren't spending ahead of the election, like Marriott?
Well, the thing is that we just received GDP for the third quarter, and the economy grew by 2.8 percentage points. That's very healthy. And indeed, it was still the consumer spending on goods and services. And so that was just in September. So
concretizando a vitória do Trump mesmo.
October, really,
Esquece, não vai ter topo essa Nasdaq não. Nasdaq, Bitcoin, dólar amanhã. Muito cuidado com venda em dólar.
Wages are not growing as rapidly as they were.
Tudo que envolva tecnologia, dólar, amanhã pode tomar muito cuidado que vai ser bem complicado. Esquece venda.
Probably continue to spend, and that they're not really letting the election hold them back on that.
Big picture, whoever is elected and goes into the White House, what kind of economy and the vibe of the consumer is that president going to be inheriting?
Sure. Well, if we continue to see decent gains in payrolls again, the October readings were very disrupted by hurricanes and also strike effects. If you pull those things out, then you probably had some positive gains in payrolls. But the important thing is that the unemployment rate is still very low. It held at 4.1%. And that's really what consumers are paying attention to. Also, as the stock market continues to rally, consumers look at that as a proxy for the economy. So if we continue to see people working, no big layoffs, and the stock market continues to do well, inflation continues to fall, and the Fed cuts interest rates in November and December, potentially starting in January, the consumer is probably going to be feeling fine. But there definitely are big risks out there for the consumer. What does the tax situation look like next year? Also, will there be more tariffs that might cause faster inflation? Those are all things that are probably going to weigh on the consumer and lean against the good news we're continuing to see on the labor market.
Dana, appreciate the update. Thank you. Dana Peterson there at the conference board. And here's an update for you at home. 188 to 102, Trump leading Harris, and no surprises just yet. But this market, as we've suggested a million times already, this evening is leaning towards the Trump trade.
Não, o 270 é o que precisa para
S&P 500. Yields higher by double-digit basis points across the curve. Look at the FX market. Dollar Mex with a 2.5% move. A much weaker Mexican peso. Coming up next on this program, still awaiting results from Michigan and Pennsylvania. Our special coverage of Election Night 2024 continues.
Porque lá não é tipo, como posso explicar, não é individual a votação, tá ligado? Você dá o voto no colégio e o colégio é a delegação. Então é meio que assim, o colégio vota no candidato, entendeu? Por isso que precisa de 270 delegados pra ganhar, entendeu? O Trump tá com 154, a Kamala com 81. Não, é absurdo, a discrepância entre os dois é ridículo.
The top names in business are on Bloomberg.
We don't know what the policy reaction function is actually going to be off of what has been said. And for that reason, we have a number of investors that are actually just sort of continuing to plow forward on the view that the economy is in pretty good shape. So that when there is an election outcome, once there's a sense for whether new policy will actually get affected, then they can have a reaction.
Nobody covers business. Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning from our world headquarters in New York. I'm Menace Credit.
And I'm Danny Berger. Let's set your agenda.
Bloomberg Brief delivers the market news, data, and analysis you need live every weekday, only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. Bloomberg ETF IQ, Monday on Bloomberg.
Live from New York City, it's election night 2024. Trump leads Harris 188.
Não, eu vou no micro.
Nothing has surprised us in the projections so far. But take a look at the price
Não, a volatilidade vai ser muito alta daqui a pouco quando sair o resultado aqui do lado esquerdo.
Double-digit basis point move across the curve, around 15 on 10s. Up 16 on 30s. And in foreign exchange, the dollar stronger against most of G10, if not all of G10. But check out this
Kamala ganhou, já tava
dollar max, 2.5%
certo, em Maine ela vai ganhar.
Mexican peso.
Connecticut vai ganhar. Pensilvânia. Tem chance ainda do Trump, né? New Jersey ela ganha. Virgínia tá ali meio a meio. Carolina do Norte com certeza o Trump ganha. Georgia, o Trump ganha. Mas não tem como, o Trump está muito na frente.
Below 20%. Now there are certain congressional districts that have seen a larger number of votes come in, primarily in the 6th district, the 7th district, and in the 11th district. No real surprises there, as the candidates in some of those areas, the leading candidates, I should say, in those areas, were expected to win by relatively wide margins. As far as the presidential race here, Kamala Harris has a slight lead right now over Donald Trump, but again, only about 15% of the precincts have actually reported. I do want to turn your attention, though, to Oakland County. And this is going to be a big determinant here of how the state of Michigan goes. The Republican Party actually holding their watch party later tonight in Oakland County in the city of Novi. Again, demographic change is a big part of the narrative here. Novi, one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Michigan. It also has the interesting distinction of having one of the largest Asian American populations here in the state of Michigan, largely Japanese Americans here. Once again, a potential a block of swing voters that both candidates have been trying to woo. Meanwhile, here in the city of Detroit behind me, the Democrats have set up shop here at the Motor City Convention Center, the Motor City Casino, excuse me, where they are holding their watch party. We did hear just a little bit earlier from Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, and of course, the former mayor of South Bend, who now calls himself a Michigander after relocating here a couple of years ago. They're trying to fire up the crowd. But again, John, it's going to be a long night here. Well, it's already now approaching 10 p.m. and we still do not have any real sense here of who is actually going to win the state of Michigan.
Well, Dave, it's also going to be a long night in Pennsylvania. Governor Josh Shapiro asking people right now, if you are watching election results in his state, please be patient. What are you seeing right now in Pennsylvania?
So, Anne Marie, when I got into this business, I was told two things. Talk about what you know and be candid about what you don't know. And with that framework in mind, let me just sort of walk you through what I'm looking at. So here I am in Pennsylvania, looking at the returns that have come in here in and around Philadelphia so far. And there's a lot of blue, but we've got 20% of those precincts reporting, so a pretty low number, but still some signs of promise for the Democratic candidate. I moved north up to Lackawanna, which is the home to Scranton, and I see more votes in, 50% of those votes in. And this is, of course, where Joe Biden is from, a place that Democrats really wanted to hold on to. Again, Kamala Harris has an edge there as well. As I look to the west, Allegheny County has the most votes in so far. About 80% of those precincts have reported. Looking good for Kamala Harris there as well. Moving north from there to Erie County, many fewer votes in yet, and we don't really have a sense of sort of how that is going to go yet. And then, of course, in the middle of the state are a lot of places that have traditionally gone for Republicans, went for Trump the last time around. So, we are in for a long night, as the governor said, as I know that you know as well. Again, we're getting these numbers. They're kind of updating in really rapid succession here as these counties sort of give us updates on what they've counted in the unofficial tallies. Looking good for Kamala Harris in many places here, but still a lot of uncertainty.
O dólar explodindo.
$1.2 billion in advertising has been spent in the Keystone State.
Que é o índice do dólar subindo 1,30%
county like Erie County cannot wait for this election to be over. You spent some time there. What is the number one issue you're hearing from individuals going out to vote?
You know, some mentioned the economy, but I was
VIX, que é o índice do medo, caindo
5,5%. Folks that I talked to here in and around Philadelphia and those whom I called when I was on the ground in other parts of the state. Yes, they talked about it. Yes, they brought up tariffs, but there were many other issues that they brought up that said they were really motivating them to go to the polls. Reproductive rights, chief among them.
Bitcoin subindo 7%,
kind of a signal moment for a lot of voters in the state, both for women and for men. That motivated them to go to the polls. And then, you know, other issues regarding health care. There was a moment here a couple of weeks back when a tape was leaked of Dave McCormick, who's the Republican candidate for Senate, saying in a private event that he was in favor of
Solana e Dogecoin subindo 20%.
That allows children up to the age of 26 to remain on their parents' plan. Bob Casey, the incumbent senator, the Democrat,
Dogecoin tá subindo, a gente sabe por quê, né? Elon Musk apoiando o Trump, ele apoia essa lixeira dessa moeda. Então, quem sabe o que pode acontecer, né?
David, thank you. Alongside Romain, to the two of you. Gentlemen, we'll catch up with you in the next hour, no doubt about it. Equities right now, session highs by more than 1% on the S&P 500. Libby Cantrell, no real insight right now on the blue wall whatsoever.
No, and I think that in some ways, some of this reporting that we're seeing out of Pennsylvania is to be expected, right? You sort of see this, a little bit of a blue mirage, then we'll get the rural vote, and then we'll get the sort of the early vote. So, yeah, again, this is, the market is definitely, you know, maybe this is reality, maybe this is a little bit of wish casting, but the market is certainly reacting to what we sort of was the base case for Harris, which is that she would have to win these blue wall states. Now she absolutely has to win them, especially if North Carolina and then Georgia are off the table. But again, not necessarily
162 delegados pro Trump.
Where the map is right now is where exactly it should be if you follow American politics at this time at night with all these states reporting. What is the market paying attention to? What insight do they have?
So for the last probably 4 or 5 days, I think the market's actually been looking at poly market and crypto markets first and foremost. I think they've been the biggest moves. People see those moves and start saying, well, this must mean something. So I think that's slightly weird, but everything's obviously moving right now. You got the Russell 2000 up 3 points, which are 3%. But I do think crypto seems to be triggering these moves, poly market. And again, these are very thin markets. They're highly often, I don't want to say manipulated, but they tend to gap. And I really look, every time I've been watching large moves, they seem to start in crypto and get dragged along everywhere else, which again, maybe the crypto bros or whoever you want to call it have been really eager. They really, really want Trump. I think that's the one clear thing, right? They really want Trump. They do not want Harris. They seem to be reacting. I think that's driving a lot of the other markets. And again, might be why we've gotten ahead of ourselves, because the story really isn't that different than you would expect if Harris was going to win, right? The map doesn't look that much different.
It's an untold story yet. The storybook has not finished. Libby, to your point, are you still telling clients at this point, take a deep breath, don't make any moves?
I mean, I think what we're saying, we're going to say exactly what we've been saying for the last 6 months, is that this is a knife fight in a phone booth.
Depende muito, né? O Trump ganhando, a gente pode ver essa Nasdaq hoje aí nos 21
Trump,
mil.
you know, 2 weeks
500
ago,
pontos aí, se decretar a vitória dele mesmo, é nada.
I mean, this is sort of
vai mexer com força Nasdaq. Nasdaq, S&P, Bitcoin. Nossa, vai explodir tudo.
You know, these red states get redder, the blue states get bluer.
Olha isso, não para de subir.
This is to be expected, that this is just going to come down to very
Dogecoin subindo 22%, Solana 13,5%, Bitcoin subindo quase 8%. DXY, o índice do dólar, não para de subir também.
And I do think you kind of can take a Harris wave off the table.
Países emergentes pode preparar que amanhã vai ser complicado.
And that mandate's clearly not coming.
Muito cuidado com venda em dólar.
I think this is actually super important. Sorry, is that if she wins, she is very likely at this point, just given where everything's trending, she will have the Republican Senate, and that just means in terms of who she can actually get confirmed will be, you know, just have to be by definition, you know, more moderate if she wins.
You said something interesting though. You just said that it looks like the pollsters potentially got it right. And in your notes, you said if the pollsters got it right, they always underestimate Trump, and that means he's probably going to win.
Well, just a second. What I said is that we've seen systemic polling error both in 2016 and in 2020. And Seltzer's poll over the weekend, there was some sort of thought that maybe we were going to see a systemic polling error the other way. What it looks like is that what pollsters are projecting is a very tight race, and that's at least as of now. I mean, we're not even at 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So as of now, that's what it looks like. This absolutely could go for Trump, but she still very much has a pathway to 270.
Let's finish there. 9:55 on the East Coast. How much confidence do you have that we get a result by sunrise?
I mean, look, I think this is going to be, as we saw, this may not be a repeat of 2020. As a reminder, the AP didn't call that election until Saturday, as we all remember. But this could very well be trending towards in that direction. But again, if this is more definitive for Trump, then we may know when we wake up.
Another projection. This time for Trump, he wins Kansas. And once again, no surprise here whatsoever. The score's right now 194 to 102. Libby Cantrell of Pinpoint, Peter Chair of Academy Securities, to the both of you. Thank you. It's good to see you. It's good to see you both. Coming up on the program, it's almost 10 p.m. on the East Coast.
Arizona.
In another 5 states. Our special coverage of election
Michigan,
night 2024
Kamala.
continues.
Pensilvânia tá ali, né? Wisconsin também tá bem acirrada.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. DraftKings has become a top performer in the booming U.S. sports betting industry. CFO Alan Ellingson knows the company must stay focused on change and innovation to succeed.
We're in an evolving business. We're constantly evolving and tweaking our expectations for how things should be performing. We're constantly looking at things in different ways.
Watch Chief Future Officer, only on Bloomberg.
Behind the bright lights and adrenaline of pro sport is an equally exciting world of negotiations and deal making.
That's what we cover each week on our podcast, The Deal.
I love the fact that you have, we say the cojones, but I can't say that in Bloomberg.
Maybe moxie?
Yeah, moxie. I'm Alex Rodriguez, former baseball player turned business executive.
And I'm Jason Kelly, a journalist at Bloomberg. Over the next couple months, we'll hear from all-stars like Billie Jean King.
Well, what should I learn? What should I do? I said, learn the business.
Jay Williams.
You're the asset, but how do you become the principal?
Paul Rabel.
We're going to be the league of digital, and that's why you're going to invest.
Adina Friedman.
I definitely am competitive.
David Rubenstein.
People don't come up to me on the street and say, let's talk about this private equity deal you did recently. No, nobody does that. They say, let's talk about the team.
And so many more.
You need a clap?
No, I never. Go.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Keely Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Live from New York City, election night 2024 at 10 p.m. on the East Coast, happening this hour. Polls closing in 5 states across the country, 28 electoral college votes up for grabs, including 6 from the battleground state of Nevada. This coming as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump square off in a race to 270. With the latest is Katie Lyons.
Well, John, right now Donald Trump is ahead in that race. 194 electoral votes have been called for him at this point by either the Associated Press or other networks, compared to just 102 for Kamala Harris. But to this point in the evening, there have been absolutely no surprises. All of the expected blue states have indeed gone blue, and the red states have gone red. But as we consider the remaining path for both of these candidates to get to 270, remember, for Kamala Harris, her easiest path goes through the blue wall, the 3 Rust Belt states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So let's check where we stand at this point in each of those. In Wisconsin, with 35% of the votes in, Donald Trump is leading by a single percentage point, 49.6% to Kamala Harris's 48.9%. In Michigan, we've only got 16% of the tally in thus far. Kamala Harris right now is up by 4 points, 51 to 47 for Trump. In Pennsylvania, as more rural vote has come into the Keystone State and its 19, of course, electoral college votes, it has increased the showing for Donald Trump. And right now, these candidates are effectively tied 49.6% to 49.5% for Kamala Harris. We're getting some new calls at this time for Donald Trump. According to the Associated Press, he has added 2 more states, Montana and Utah. No surprises expected, red states, but that does take his tally up to 204 electoral votes. So he right now has double that of Kamala Harris, who remains at 102. And keep in mind, if Kamala Harris cannot pick up Pennsylvania, she's going to have to win either Georgia or North Carolina. In North Carolina right now, there is 66% of the votes counted, and Donald Trump right now is leading her by a margin of 5 points. He has 52% of the vote in North Carolina. In Georgia, there are 80% of the votes counted. He also is leading by a margin of 5 points, 52% to Harris's 47. We're just getting some results reported from Arizona, only 4% in right now, but Donald Trump is leading early. And of course, the 7th and final battleground state, John, just had polls closed. Nevada has closed as of 10 p.m. Eastern time.
Looking forward to an update there a little bit later this hour. Katie, thanks for that. Appreciate it. For an update on the balance of power on Capitol Hill at the analysis desk, here's Joe Matthew.
Jonathan, I want to stick with the Senate here. So far, all going as planned. Republican Jim Justice, as we told you early in the evening, projected to win the Senate seat in West Virginia. That is actually the only Republican pickup so far. It happened early, and there could be more. The Florida Senate race for Republican Rick Scott, according to the Associated Press, and Andy Kim, the Democrat, becomes the new senator from New Jersey. Now we add some big ones, as Kaylee mentioned, with 18 races, by the way, yet to be called on the Senate front here. Nevada, Senator Jackie Rosen, the Democrat, trying to fend off a challenge by Republican Sam Brown. Polls have shown her holding a pretty consistent lead, so this is going to be something worth watching for the sake of Democrats. In Montana now, just projected for Donald Trump to win. Democratic Senator John Tester is in the political fight of his life against a Republican businessman, a former Navy SEAL named Tim Sheehy. This is a race that many polls show favoring the Republican. There have been some outliers. If Tester can hang on here, he gives Democrats a much better chance of holding the Senate. Remembering that Donald Trump, again, just won the state, and that down ballot effect, the coattails there for Donald Trump could be powerful in this case. Republicans, again, only need to flip 2 to take control. John?
Hey, Joe, thank you. We'll touch base with you again in about 30 minutes' time. A new projection. Harris wins Colorado. As expected, the score's now 204 to 112. Some big moves in this market. Let's get to them. Here's Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. This is a bond market on fire. The move now in your 10-year yield, more than 17 basis points, trading at 4.44. Just to put this in context, $52 billion of 10-year bonds were sold at an auction today. If you had bought them, you've already lost 10 basis points by this point in the night. It's interesting to think, at what point does higher yields, again, this is kind of the Trump trade coming alive, really closely tracking some of the betting market odds. At what point do higher yields hurt equities? It is not happening yet. Equities across the board are higher, but it is concentrated again in a classic Trump trade, that of small caps, up nearly 3.5% for Russell 2000 futures. Mike Wilson says that after 20 basis points worth of moves on your 10-year yield, that's when this trade comes under pressure. Again, we are not there yet. We are at 17 basis points at this moment. The other market under extreme volatility volatility. That is your FX market. Perhaps the epicenter, that is dollar MEX. That is at its weakest level in 2 years versus the dollar. Again, though, I want to emphasize this, John. I've been talking to multiple traders tonight. They say this market looks very illiquid at this moment. Not a lot of people trading currencies. Something that's perhaps surprising since we know banks staffed extra desks, but still that's leading to extra volatility in markets that are otherwise being bullied around a whole heck of a lot.
Danny, stay close. We'll be back with you in about 15 minutes' time. Let's get back to the bond board. Check out these moves. 2-year, 10-year, 30-year. Double-digit basis point moves across the curve, up 17 on 10s and up close to 20 on 30s. Let's bring in our guest host for the next hour. Joining us around the table, Dan Greenhouse of Solace Alternative Asset Management. Dan, good evening.
Thank you for having me here. And before we get started, I just want to register a complaint.
Who to?
To you.
Order submitted.
Or to everyone.
Order canceled.
Chairing our election coverage.
What is the complaint?
I'm not sure.
As a legal resident in this country, are you upset by that?
I think
Não tem como ser stop e culto
Do you want to get a little bit deeper about that conversation? Would you rather avoid it?
I should have thought about what specifically about the accent before I just came out and said the accent.
Well, you've done it now. We can move on because I'm a gentleman and a good friend of yours.
Yes.
In the bond market, big moves.
Yeah.
What do you make of these moves?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we were talking earlier. I think right now, certainly in the election, you would rather be former President Trump than Vice President Harris. But we were also just saying there's a lot of wood to chop here. In Georgia, where there's a lot of optimism, I'm sure, in the Trump camp. Gwinnett County, which is a particularly a very strong Democrat stronghold, only has about 18% reported right now. So there's a lot of wood to chop there. And then obviously none of the blue wall is revealed as of yet.
Exactly. You'd rather be him right now
Sure.
because of the states that we know. But we still need to know Wisconsin,
Of
Michigan, Pennsylvania. What are you seeing county-wise? Or what do you think the markets maybe are seeing on the margins of these states that are giving them this extra oomph to go all in on the Trump trade?
Yeah, I wrote down a couple of counties that I was looking at. One is Loudoun County in Virginia. Obviously, well, not obviously, but presumably former Vice President Harris was going to win that state. Loudoun County, people who follow politics closely will be familiar with Loudoun County for a number of non-great reasons. There's a 4 percentage point deficit there compared to last year. Hamilton County, one of those important suburbs in Indiana, a state that former President Trump is not going to lose, but that county had been trending in the direction of Democrats. That looks like it's holding up now. North, he's got about 52% of the vote there. A really important one, Florida, obviously, state already called for former President Trump. Miami-Dade County, he's got over 55% of the vote right now. That in 2020 voted 53% for Joe Biden, a huge swing there. Obviously, Hispanic community there. What does that mean for Texas and a number of other districts? And in Osceola, which is one of the few Latino-leaning districts or Latino majority districts in Florida, he's got 50% of the vote there. Biden won that district with 56% of the vote.
So you'd rather be Trump right now. Is it your baseline that with Trump at the top of the ticket, it is a red sweep? Or do you think he wins the presidency and potentially maybe not the Senate, but the House potentially could swing back to Democrat?
My assumption coming into this is easy to say now at 10 p.m. with a little bit of data in hand. Sure. My assumption was that it would be a red sweep. I thought that. Listen, I know the press has to pretend like there's a debate here, but the Senate was gone. You knew West Virginia was gone. John Tester was probably gone. If Trump was going to have a good night, which so far he's doing okay, Sherrod Brown is in real trouble. And then you met Deb Fischer. Like, you start expanding the map there for the Senate. But the Senate was gone just by whom we already articulated. The House, we're not going to know the House, obviously, for weeks. But I think, obviously, if what's happening continues to happen, and again, for all the reasons that we mentioned, let's not get out our skis here, the House is probably going to go as well. So that was my working assumption, yes.
There were some worries, some concerns in places like Florida. You could see that Senator Scott was concerned about them after the rally at Madison Square Garden. No evidence whatsoever that it's hurt him.
No evidence whatsoever this has hurt him at all. In Florida, it was a very good night for the former president. But to your point, Jonathan, you're looking at very Hispanic communities that they seem to be showing up for Trump at the moment. Again, we still need to know more data. But of course, that was that awful joke at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And then you saw Republicans come out, not just Senator Rick Scott, also the congressman representing New York 4, very tight race, coming out immediately saying, I denounce these comments. A lot of concern, maybe this would hurt them. It hasn't so far.
I'm usually asleep by now. And I wake up sometimes in the morning and I go to the Asian trade and have a look at some big moves that have taken place. And a lot of people say, well, liquidity is not that great. You see people pushing around markets in Tokyo all the time. I was surprised that people are coming on the programme, and I'm hearing it a lot, Dan, that this is illiquidity. It's not a very liquid market.
Sure.
Given that I heard that basically everyone was staffing their desks preparing to trade this market. So what's going on?
I think whenever you have overnight moves of any substance, you're going to blame it on illiquidity. I don't work at a big bank, so I can't speak to the liquidity or not, obviously, in real time. But I think illiquidity seems to be a safe move. But I would also add, I think a lot of people probably of a certain age will remember Carl Icahn talking about how he left a party and went back to the office and made $1 billion.
2016.
Yes, trading equity futures, and maybe somebody wants to be the next person to do that. I mean, again, to the point earlier, I would just repeat: we've got some time to go here.
Got a few more hours, potentially. You going to stick with us?
I will stay here as long as you will have me.
Okay.
And by the time I'm done, I'll have a British accent.
Okay, possibly. Let's see if you're welcome back in about 2 or 3 minutes' time. Stay tuned. Coming up on the programme, still awaiting results from key battleground states. Our special coverage of Election Night 2024 continues.
There's a lot of fears around AI. AI is not technologically neutral, right? The splitting of the atom is not technologically neutral. There's implications.
Hi, Toma. Hey there, Emily. You have machines that say, I love you. I care about you. I'm your friend.
I'm a human, not an AI. You can't just shut me down. Who do you think you are?
I'm Emily Chang. Welcome to Posthuman.
Things like making sure your account is private, right? When you sign up and you're a teenager, private by default, that you're focused on adding people you already know out in the real world, your real friends, that, our service doesn't have, public likes, these comparison metrics that we know, can make people feel bad about themselves. We moderate the content that we distribute on our platform to try to mitigate, the spread of harmful content. So we've tried to make a lot of choices to, make our service, a healthy and fun place with friends. And we hear that, when we do research, we find that people, rank Snapchat as the happiest platform. They say that it helps them feel closer to their friends. So I think we're really focused on what we can control in terms of improving the product experience. And then we always try to encourage parents, don't let your teenager, use Snapchat unless they're above the age of 13. And there are tools available today on your phone, iOS, Android, that are really easy to use to help limit, what teens can use on their phones.
It's the countdown to the market open as we bring you the first trades across Europe.
We'll debate the most important stories and what will drive the big investment decisions throughout the morning. I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Kriti Gupta.
And I'm Anna Edwards. Join us every weekday morning for the opening trade, live at 7 a.m. here in London.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Live from New York City, it's Election Night 2024. Trump, 204. Harris, 112. And no big surprises either way at the moment this evening. In the equity market, some big moves, though. With the latest, let's cross over to Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. Peter Scheer in the last hour said that the reason that these markets are moving, even though we don't have any certainty, is because they're tracking off of betting market odds and of crypto. I just wanted to run through this because this is a betting market that is pricing in near certainty that Trump will take this thing home. Overall, the Trump odds on Polymarket are at a record high, just about 89%. You look at the swing states, it's even more certainty priced in to the betting markets. North Carolina, for example, it is above 96% at 97%. Similar moves also for Georgia and for Arizona. So all of that is leading to crypto, to Bitcoin markets that are going further and further. At one point, trading at a record, we are just under that level. Actually, sorry, we've gone back above that level and back under. 73,800 is about where the record is of all time. So we are there. And John, that does seem to be leading the entirety of the Trump trades higher. higher, with yields higher and dollars stronger, and small cap stocks also taken off.
Danny, thank you. Appreciate it. Just getting a headline. Anne-Marie out of Texas.
Yeah, that's right. Senator Ted Cruz maintains and holds his seat. Look, this was the white whale moment, potentially for the Democrats, the one place they were playing aggressive offense, but everyone thought it potentially could be a pipe dream. It ended up being a pipe dream. Senator Ted Cruz holds his seat.
That's the latest news in the last minute or so. Let's cross over to Terry Haynes of Pangea Policy. Terry, welcome to the programme. You've said consistently that Harris had the edge, that we're 70% likely that we get a split government, Dem House, Republican Senate, small majorities. You've got some extra data, some more information. Where do you stand now?
I am where I was, John. The good news for Trump is that, frankly, is that he's on the way to winning North Carolina. That wasn't at all a given, considering the fallout in the governor's race, which got called for the Democrat. But other than that, this is pretty much fallen in line the way it was, and it's still pretty early. We talked this morning, and I gave you a particular bellwether county in Pennsylvania, and that's only 55% reported right now. So we've still got a long way to go, but I don't think there's any serious negative surprises here.
So when it comes to the map right now, it is what you would expect at 10:15 on the East Coast on election night. What are you looking for the rest of the evening? What county specifically in the blue wall that could potentially show Harris' strength or Trump's strength?
Well, I look at Washington County, Pennsylvania, which is just below Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. The reason I do that is because it's got pretty much everything. It's got the highest home prices in the greater Pittsburgh area, and it's also got some of the poorest parts of western Pennsylvania. And the entire game in Pennsylvania always is you pump up blue vote in Philadelphia and the suburbs, and that's supposed to overwhelm the red vote in the rest of the state. Well, you get that in microcosm in Washington County. So I'm going to continue to look really closely to see exactly what happens there.
Terry, you got more data, as John mentioned. Do you have more of an idea of when this election could be called?
I don't think it's going to be quick. I certainly wish I didn't have to say that. But I don't think this is going to be a situation where we're going to know with a great deal of certainty tonight. I'll say that. The other thing I will say always is that the makeup of Congress for policy, for markets, is more important than the presidency. And I still think we're on track for a split government here with a marginally Democratic House and a Republican Senate.
Terry, what are you telling investors, though? You think settle in, the map has to come in more, we're not there yet. The market thinks Trump has won.
Well, I don't have a lot of regard for betting markets. I mean, I'm not going to defend polls, but at least the polls, your unknowns are known, as Don Rumsfeld would say. You know what you got with polls. They are what they are. You got 4% margin of error, and then you've got a situation where even in the best likely voter polls, you look at turnout. Turnout in 2020 was 66%, so there's another deviation there. And but you can kind of figure out and know what you do. Know what you know. Betting markets are all like a bunch of people standing around dollar slots telling you to pump one more in or not. My only advice to people involved in betting markets is it's way early.
Hey, Terry, it's Dan Greenhouse. But I agree with you on everything you're saying about betting markets, but the 10-year is moving, equity futures are moving. It's not just Polymarket and Kalshi or whatever. It is assets that are reacting to this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I agree with you, Dan. But, back to Anne-Marie's point, I will say also that what comes out of this election, generally speaking, and I think regardless of who the president is largely markets negative. Markets are getting squirrelier and squirrelier about fiscal debt and deficit. That's in the United States, and they certainly are squirrely about it in the United Kingdom. I mean, we've just seen that with the budget over the past few days. You've got that going, and at the same time, what you've got is you've got a situation where there's a lot of concern about tariffs, for example, and and I think there are going to be more tariffs almost regardless because it's going to morph into a national security issue. And the only countervailings I see on a lot of this stuff is kind of defense and defense industrial base, because post-election, what you'll see Washington move into is a situation where there's much more focus on actually kind of pumping up arsenal of democracy sorts of things.
Hey, Terry, that was a highlight of this evening, that laugh. Terry Haynes of Pangaea. Terry, appreciate it, sir. Thank you. We are higher by 16 basis points on a 10-year. I'm not going to sit here and say the market's decided that Trump has won, but it's certainly leaning in that direction. And we've seen that lean. It started at about 7:30 Eastern time. It's 10:20 now, and it continues. We've got session highs on equity markets. Bond yields are higher. The dollar's a whole lot stronger. Dan Greenhouse, over the last month, we have seen episodes of where this market will shift towards Trump, even though the polls have been really rock steady. How did you interpret that price action over the last month?
Listen, the street has put together baskets of the Trump trade, so to speak. I think when the media talks about the Trump trade, it's usually through the prism of higher equities or higher bond yields for all the reasons that have been discussed, which we can go into. But you can look at baskets that include, in the case of a Harris basket, that might include solar stocks and wind stocks and all alternative energy stocks. And in the case of President Trump or former President Trump, it might be crypto stocks, industrial stocks, things like that. Those names have been reacting for some time now. Now, they have clearly been going in the direction of polls. But in the last couple of days, or dare I say even a week or two, there's been a divergence where they've done even better than the polls when the polls have gone down in the case of President Trump. I think when you speak to people around the street, the belief has been for some time that he would win for any number of reasons. The street leans conservative in general, so there's an institutional bias there. But I also think some of the stuff that we follow in much greater detail than the average analyst, if you will, the average person that follows politics, we're leading a lot of people to believe that he probably had the edge.
Dan, when you look at the Trump trade in the market, how do you reconcile two things? People say it's going to be great when you lower taxes, but it's not going to be so good when he puts the walls up on tariffs.
Yeah, so the tariffs are obviously a problem, measured in a couple of $100 billion. I don't think anybody really thinks he's doing 60% on China. I think the legality of a 10% across the board tariff notwithstanding, I think people think there's going to be something like a 10% across the board tariff. But I also think everybody just agrees that this is good.
But you can get the bad things almost instantaneously with Trump and not the good things for the financial community. That TCJA doesn't expire to the end of 2025.
No, that's correct. Listen, with respect to tariffs, I think my conversations with investors and Solis or just people across the street is we lived through the first 4 years and it wasn't all that bad. He put tariffs on a number of people. It wasn't all that bad. Inflation wasn't out of control. There wasn't anarchy, cats and dogs living together. None of that really happened in the first 4 years related to the tariffs. Obviously, there was some other stuff going on, but the tariffs didn't drive the types of outcomes that economists are constantly harping on today. And I think there is a universal view, certainly in Washington, as we all know, but on the street as well, there is a universally held view that China is, for lack of a better word, to oversimplify it, a threat. And maybe there is a price to be paid for the country as a whole to countering that threat. And I would also add, just China's iffy right now, and one of the strongest legs of their stool is exports. And I think there's going to be people around President Trump who are going to be making the case, this country's pretty weak right now. If we do something serious on the tariff front, we could maybe derail whatever ascent that they've been on and remain on.
You're a fixed income guy. I think it sets up some really interesting trades.
I'm a cross-asset, universal...
Well, let's sit on fixed income just for a moment.
Sure.
I'm giving you a compliment. It usually means you're smart, you're a fixed income guy.
Okay.
So let's sit on fixed income. If we do get a lot of tariffs on China coming into the United States, then someone's got to eat that overcapacity. And it may well be Europe. And you'd have to imagine that we could have this situation where you have a disinflationary shock in Europe. And I'm not sure how pronounced the inflationary shock would be stateside, but how much divergence would you expect between growth, inflation, and rates, and bond yields, and equities between the United States and Europe with that in mind?
There's a whole lot of questions in there.
You said you were cross-assets, so 1 bonds.
Listen, I think the answer to that question is it's impossible to know, since we don't know when the tariffs are going to be put on what they will be put, and the degree to which they will be increased.
Well, he says blanket tariffs.
Yeah, then listen, we can run the numbers, and you'll raise anywhere from 200 to 500 billion in revenue, something like that, 2 to 400 billion in revenue, if you hit everything. Obviously, there's retaliatory tariffs. To what extent are they put on? Consumers, in some cases, can't shift behavior as quickly as you would like. So it's just an incredibly difficult exercise to do. But again, I think from his point of view, or from the people around his point of view, they're going to say this is, and he certainly agrees, this is something that we need to do from a national security threat. You've heard from economists that are around him. You've heard from policy advisors, Robert Lighthizer type people around him, saying this is about national security, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably going to be a winning argument for much of his base, and certainly, I think, for the people around him.
And if we do end up with another Trump presidency, he knows how this works. Ambassador Lighthizer could well be part of that administration all over again.
Right. Ambassador Lighthizer can go right back to his old job at USTR, or he can move next door to the Treasury to become Treasury Secretary, or be close to the former president's special advisor in the West Wing. He's going to bring in individuals who, by the way, what I hear from people, they're already working on the plan in terms of tariffs, the legality of all this. Potentially, if they are, say, a 60% blanket tariff on Chinese imports, they probably want to have Congress along with them for the ride. They're already working scenarios. If they were to win,
Iowa, Trump também já
ganhou. This is scenario analysis because no one's won anything yet. The scores right now 204 to 112. Trump is leading, but no surprises whatsoever in the projections we've had at the moment. Equity futures on the S&P 500 with a pretty major move. On the S&P, we're up by 1.3%. On the small caps, we're absolutely ripping. On the Russell, the small caps higher by close to 3%, in the bond market, yields are higher by 16 basis points on a 10-year. On a 30-year, we're up by close to 18. We're up by close to 9 on a 2-year, 426.36, and in foreign exchange, quite a move on dollar mex. A much, much weaker Mexican peso. Dollar mex with a move of 2.9%. Dan Greenhouse is going to stick with us, I think. We're going to take this show on the road. Coming up next on the programme, another set of poll closings coming at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. 4 states with 78 electoral college votes up for grabs. Election night 2024 continues. 204, 112. Donald Trump leads. Harris trails. More still to come from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Vamos lá. Lembrando que eu vou ajustar o stop de 10 em 10 pontos. Se voltar agora não saiu não. Essa compra eu tô querendo segurar até a máxima. Vamos lá. Tá bem defendido. Também ele veio da onde? Veio do 390 pro 600 sem parar, olha isso. Máxima atrás de máxima sem olhar para trás.
How it has penetrated pretty much all sectors, including music. AI can write music, compose music. How do you see AI changing the landscape in fashion?
Yeah, AI definitely helped. When I did the jewelry, I used the AI, helping me to give some idea, but ultimately you still have to do a lot with it. It just give you very superficial ideas, and but at the end you still have to customize it, how to really make it and do that. I do not think that AI and the technology can replace the human mind at this moment. Yeah.
Are you concerned one day we won't be able to differentiate designs by AI and designs by an actual designer?
I don't know. For me, I feel that when the design is doing is the
Olha a defesa do 600.
That the computer don't have.
Região bem brigada, bem defendida. Se eu não me engano, a máxima histórica ela tá aqui no 760.
Gilead is coming out right now. We have take 2 numbers. Back to the markets, right? Our bread and butter.
NVIDIA is one of the best stories of the tech space.
That actually matters a whole lot more.
It might shock some of your viewers.
You're watching The Close.
Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Earnings season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg. Earnings season is here.
Third quarter earnings season, as we've been talking about, really in high gear.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
We have some big earnings after the bell. Earnings from Caesars crossing the Bloomberg terminal.
Mondelez is reporting Reddit, AMD, Snap.
Let's keep the conversation going.
With the smartest insights.
The bar keeps getting higher. 20% growth rate when your comps get tougher.
Até quando os vendidos vai conseguir segurar o preço aí no 600.
Coverage on Bloomberg.
Vai demorar muito não.
Everything.
Agora às 1h aqui do Brasil vai sair o resultado de mais 4 estados. Pelo que a Bloomberg falou aqui. Trump já com 204 delegados contra 112 da Harris.
Aqui na CNN não atualizou ainda. By more than 1%. On the Russell, the small caps up by 2.5. The score right now, 204 to 112. In the bond market, seen a big move.
Por onde eu tô vendo pela Bloomberg.
204 to 112 to Trump. There's no surprises in that.
Bloomberg
Television. This a few times already. This is just a consequence of the order that things have been called in so far. This was expected. Right where we are right now was widely expected, but in this bond market, we've made the decision to lean back towards the Trump trades, up by 18 basis points on a 30-year. 461.45 on 10s up 16, 443 on the race to 270. Here's Candy Lights.
Yeah, John, as we consider the lack of surprises tonight, we are where we would expect to be at 10:30 p.m. on the East Coast, keeping in mind that some big Democratic prizes, like the state of California with its 54 electoral votes, have not yet closed. Polls close there about 30 minutes from now, so that could help along Kamala Harris's first score stands at just 112 electoral votes right now to Donald Trump, who, of course, has 204. But it's 270 where they both need to get. And if Kamala Harris wants to do so, her easiest way is through the Rust Belt, the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which right now are not looking abundantly blue or abundantly red. In Wisconsin, we have 51% of the votes counted, and right now it is within a margin of 2 points. 50% for Donald Trump, 48.6% for Kamala Harris. Turning to Michigan, 22% of the votes counted, so we're moving a little slower in Michigan, and right now it is basically a dead heat. Both candidates right around 49%. Pennsylvania, of course, is going to be critical with its 19 electoral votes, and as more rural vote has come in, Donald Trump has actually gained a lead. Right now, with 56% of the votes counted, he is leading Harris by 3 points, 51% to 48%. And our colleague Jonathan Tamari at Bloomberg Government, who knows Pennsylvania inside and out, is looking specifically at Lackawanna County in the northeastern part of the state. It is a county that Joe Biden won in 2020 by 9,600 votes. Right now, 98% of the count is in there, and Kamala Harris is only leading by roughly 3,500. So a sign that she may be underperforming where Joe Biden was in 2020. And keep in mind, if she cannot win Pennsylvania, she must win either Georgia or North Carolina. And we do have a significant portion of the votes in those states. In North Carolina, 75% of the votes are counted, and Donald Trump is leading by 6 points, 52.6% to Harris's 46.4. And even more of the count is in Georgia, 88% of the tally, according to the Associated Press. And Donald Trump is up by 51.3% to Harris's 48.1%. The final Sunbelt state that has had some votes reported at this hour at roughly 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. 49% of the vote count in Arizona, and it is effectively a dead heat. Both candidates right around 49%. We have gotten nothing reported from the 7th battleground state at this point, John. That, of course, is Nevada. At this hour, this race is still very much too close to call.
Kelly, thank you. If we get any news, we'll bring it to you on the balance of power in Washington. At the analysis desk with more, here's Joe Matthew.
Jonathan, it was a tease in Texas for Democrats, as it turns out. This was a conversation that was allowed to happen because polls showed Congressman Colin Allred within striking distance of potentially beating Senator Ted Cruz, the Republican from Texas. Not the case. It's been called by multiple networks here as we bring in Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors, for their take on this. I know you guys had a little bit of a bet going. We can solve this on the air right now because I guess this
Senado
is said and
do Texas,
done. Jeannie, you never thought
foi republicano
Democrats were going to
também,
flip that seat, did you?
Que é o Ted Cruz.
Well, I can see Rick
Davis over there gloating.
Mais uma
And now
vitória
I
aí
owe him
dos
some kind of
republicanos.
steak dinner, I suppose. You know,
Teoricamente,
Democrats were
todos os
feeling very
republicanos
positive
quando
and
ganham é bom
optimistic
pro
about
mercado.
Colin Allred. He's a great
Por conta
candidate.
do Trump, né?
You know, it was always an uphill battle. It was, you know, he
esse
had to get
movimento
over
pra
that
cima aí, se
47%
parece
hump.
comprador.
And there was tons of money went into that state. And I had a steak dinner on it. And it looks like it hasn't come through.
No, it hasn't.
But I was.
But it wasn't the only one. Rick Scott was said to be in danger in Florida, according to some polls as well. Democrats got ahead of themselves in these two states.
Yeah, look, I think they were trying to find a way to offset the losses they knew they were going to get in places like West Virginia, so they had to find some pickups. I mean, it's so close in the United States Senate. They need to find a cushion, and they were stacked against them at the beginning of the year. They have many more seats at risk than the Republicans did. It was always going to be a good year for Republicans, but you know, Democrats always have this fantasy that they're going to put Texas in play. They talk about even winning it at a presidential election.
State of Texas.
And I get it. I mean, like, you know, it's a big prize to get, but every time it happens, people get all excited. A lot of money is spent. Candidates go travel there.
Yeah.
To scratch your head.
Senado
Why
da
are they
Flórida,
in
quem
Texas?
ganhou foi o republicano
And at
Rick
the end of the
Scott
day, they're
também.
disappointed. So, look, come spend your money in Texas. It's good for the Chamber of
O
Commerce.
republicano
But
tá
don't
na
expect
frente
to
em
win if
tudo,
you're a
né?
Democrat.
Remember, you questioned why Kamala
49
Harris
republicano
was in
contra
Houston.
36
Maybe she should have
democratas
gone to
no Senado.
Montana. What's going to happen? John Tester is said to be in more danger, I guess, than any other Democrat in the contested states here, the 11 Senate races that we're watching. We're at 0% right now. Donald Trump has already had the state called for him by the Associated Press. John Tester, Tim Sheehy. This is going to tell us a lot about who controls the Senate.
It is. You know, to Rick's point, the map always looked so difficult for Democrats this time around. And for John Tester to pull this out was going to be such an uphill battle for him. It is a very red state. Donald Trump, you know, last time double digits. This time, you know, I don't even know, but I'm assuming it is a big margin for him already. Mm-hmm. And so for John Tester to pull this out was going to be tough. I don't think we have a call on this one yet. But it's going to be an uphill battle.
We don't have a clue. They're at 0% when it comes to the Senate race. I'm sure the Associated Press knows more than we do, Rick. But this is an interesting one. There was a real local connection a lot of people have with John Tester. The way he commanded the Farm Bill was something that hit home with the farmers of Montana. Maybe he shouldn't be giving up on this yet.
Look, he's always had very good political timing because he was never on the ballot when there was a presidential election, and boom, he got caught this time. So all of a sudden there's going to be this massive Republican turnout for Trump, and you know, there's no such thing as a ticket splitter in Montana. So the reality is that Sheehy's been polling at 50% coming into the election. So public polls have indicated that he was there with the numbers that he needed. If he can confirm that tonight, we're going to flip that seat.
We had the West Coast a little bit later on this hour, John. A lot more to follow.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Joe. Getting a new projection for you. Trump takes Iowa. Let's cross over to Kaylee Lyons for more. Hey, Kaylee.
Yeah, John, Iowa, of course, carries with it 6 electoral votes. Right now, according to the Associated Press, only 48% of those votes have been counted, but Donald Trump is leading among that less than half of votes by a wide margin. We're talking about 12 points here. Remember, this is one that we had been watching, as just in recent days, Ann Seltzer of the Des Moines Register Iowa poll had actually had Kamala Harris in the lead by 3 points. It was a poll that caught a lot of attention, captured specifically some momentum with women, but clearly not enough to bring Harris over the finish line in Iowa, as Donald Trump has won Iowa by right now with a margin of roughly 12 points. This race called by multiple networks, and that, of course, will add 6 more electoral votes to his total tally here, keeping in mind that Kamala Harris has remained relatively stagnant for now at 112 electoral votes. Donald Trump will now be brought up to 210 on the race to 270, John.
Katie, thank you. Appreciate it. A week ago, that wasn't going to be news. Wouldn't even talk about it. But after the poll we had over the weekend, it's notable.
It's notable to talk about after that Ann Seltzer poll, which actually you saw the financial markets pick up immediately Sunday night into Monday morning. What I would say, though, about that Iowa poll is no one I spoke to, Democrats or Republicans, thought Harris had a chance to win Iowa. What they did take from that poll was that potentially Harris was showing strength with women, notably north of 65 years old.
Order canceled.
So maybe this would bode
Order filled.
Bode better for Harris in a place like Wisconsin and the neighboring blue wall. Maybe they would break for her. And we need to remind our viewers, we don't have the blue wall yet.
Yeah.
That is Harris's path to success.
Well, let's talk about how narrow that path is for success based on the data we have so far this evening. How narrow is it?
Well, when you look at exit polls, which again, grain of salt, I've been told already today, don't look at exit poll. When you look at exit polls, what you're seeing on NBC News is they're talking about people who've decided who they're going to vote for late in the race. They were breaking for Trump. CBS is talking about the fact that young individuals, especially young men in a place like Michigan, were breaking for Trump. NBC News exit poll in Wisconsin was talking about Trump doubling his share of black voters in Wisconsin. So exit polling at the moment, again, grain of salt. You cannot take this to the bank. But exit polling at the moment is showing some strength in the former president.
Dan, just a final word for this segment with you. The scores are 210, 112. We've heard repeatedly from a range of guests, no surprises. And then you look at the price action, you see big moves. What have you been surprised by, if anything at all, so far this evening?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any surprises at the headline, but I think some of the county stuff that we've been talking about is what's driving a lot of the action, or at least, in my opinion, having spoken to nobody since I'm here with you. I'm going through Virginia right now, for instance. The fact that we're at 10:40 at night and we haven't called Virginia tells you something. She's underperforming Biden in Fairfax and Prince William. I mentioned Loudoun earlier. There's something going on here in a number of counties around the country that say that she's not as strong as she needs to be. And I know it hasn't been called yet, but you're at 85% of the vote in North Carolina. He's still north of 50. There's still work to do here, but I think that's what asset markets are looking at. Not just the headline numbers, but what those trends, to the point about the Ann Seltzer poll, what those trends might mean for elsewhere.
Speaks to the lean in this market right now in equities, bonds and foreign exchange. Dan Greenhouse is going to stick with us. Coming up next on the programme, a conversation with Sarah Bianchi of Evercore as we wait for key results across the battleground states. Election night 2024 continues.
Jumpstart your trading day on Bloomberg Open Interest.
2 hours of single stock stories that are driving the opening bell action.
We'll take you to Wall Street, Main Street, the C-suite, and beyond.
These are companies that are growing their market.
The great companies in the U.S. are the companies hitting the cutting edge. That's a different story.
Get the inside track on what's buzzing in markets.
With the players who are shaping the narrative.
If you have bad earnings reports, you're going to get punished.
They're not buying what the industry is selling. Join us on Bloomberg Open Interest. Weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week.
Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute technology news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Annabelle Drawlers in Taipei, and this is Bloomberg.
Live from New York City, it's election night 2024. The scores, 210, 112. Trump leads Harris. This from Neil Dutter of Renmac just moments ago. It's early. We don't know who wins, but if it holds, the financial markets are rerunning the 2016 playbook. Small caps are ripping here, Danny. Ripping big time.
They are ripping big time. Look, we are off the highs that we've seen on the session, but that doesn't take away from the type of move that we are seeing. Small caps up nearly 3%. Dare I say this is